Good morning and welcome to our Zoom worship service. I'm Ginger Yoder, your Director of Family Ministries, and I'm filling in for Elizabeth this morning, who's taking a much needed Sunday off. And we also have a very special guest with us that I'm very excited to share with you. And Z's name is Leela. And I don't know if you want to pop on real quick and just say hi. I'm surprising.
Hi, everyone.
Because I did not say I was going to do this. And, why not start the service off with something crazy? So we're really happy to have you with us today leading our solstice service.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And we begin our service, of course, with our acknowledgement, our territorial acknowledgement. When we acknowledge the land on which our homes and our church were built, we're inhabited already by European settlers when many of our ancestors arrived here. For those of us who live in Moscow or Pullman or nearby, we live on the ancestral homelands of the Nimipu, called the Nez Perce by the French-speaking traders, the Palouse, and the Shitshumish, called the Coeur d'Alene. If you're joining us from another place, we encourage you to discover who inhabited or moved through the places where you now live in the times before colonization and genocide, and where they are now. We pause to remember that we live on ground that is sacred, ground that was stolen, ground that cries out for justice and for responsible stewardship. May our remembering help us find the courage to do our part to restore wholeness to the earth and all her people. And now let us join our voices together for our words of welcome, unison chalice lighting, and sung affirmation. Whoever you are, wherever you come from, and whatever your beliefs, whomever you love, and however bumpy your life's journey, know that you are welcome here. We're hoping you have a candle or a chalice of some sort to light and something to light it with.
In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek and seek to share.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung in every land by every tongue.
The sun rises. The sun sets, 20, 20, 20, rising, setting, so long, drawn so long in the shadow, long in the tooth, this long time, long underground, long nights, such long nights. The sun rises, the sun sets, rises and sets, long and longer shadows, the thin light of morning, too weak to pierce the veil some days. Some days. Birds call crisp across the crisp crust of white, so sharp it cuts. The sun sets, the sun sets, the sun sets. Light pools on the kitchen floor far into the corner, glass glinting as one morning coffee warms fingers. The sun rises, it rises, whispers, reveling. At last, come, let us worship together.
Soft and still, your quiet calm surrounds me. Let my thoughts go where they will, ease my mind profoundly, and then my soul will sing a song, a blessed song of love eternal, gentle darkness, soft and still. Bring your quiet
of night.
Icy cold winds blow, freezing winter snow, Yuletide is come. Feel the icy breath, bitter cold of death, Yuletide is come. Icy cold winds blow, freezing winter snow, Yuletide is come. Feel the icy breath, bitter cold of death, Yuletide is come. Coldest, darkest of night, coldest, darkest of night.
Wintertime and Yule blow, blow, cold winter wind, blow, blow, Yuletide.
Icy cold winds blow, freezing winter snow, Yuletide is come. Feel the icy breath, bitter cold of death, Yuletide is come. Icy cold winds blow, freezing winter snow, Yuletide is come. Feel the icy breath, bitter cold of death, Yuletide is come. Icy cold winds blow, freezing winter snow, Yuletide is come. Feel the icy breath, bitter cold of death, Yuletide is come. Coldest, longest of night, coldest, darkest of night,
Wintertime and Yule.
How beautiful. Let us gather ourselves in the spirit of meditation to hear these wise words from Adrienne Marie Brown's book, Pleasure Activism. Yes is the way. When it was time to move to Detroit, when it was time to leave my last job, when it was time to pick up a meditation practice, time to swim, time to eat healthier, I knew because it gave me pleasure when I made and lived into the decision. Now, I am letting that guide my choices for how I organize and for what I am aiming toward with my work. Pleasure in the processes of my existence and states of my being. Yes is a future. When I feel pleasure, I know I am on the right track. Puerto Rican pleasure elder Idlis Malave shared with me her pleasure principle. If it pleases me, I will. When I am happy, it is good for the world. The deepest pleasure comes from riding the line between commitment and detachment. Commit yourself fully to the process, the journey, to bringing the best you can bring. Detach yourself from ego and outcomes. Make justice and liberation feel good. Your no makes the way for your yes.
In this darkest hour, be still. In this darkest hour, be still and know. Be still and know the calling of your heart. Know a new dream soon will start. In this darkest hour, be still. And feel the earth that surrounds us, and each star spiraling
and know the peace that dwells inside. Know that joy and love abide in this mystery. Be still and feel the healing earth around God's love and His power spiraling around. Feel the stillness at the center of it all, as His spirit tranquil grace, when the solstice candles gently glow at His fire, on His flawless morning. We wait in stillness in the dark, yet returning toward the light. Yes, returning toward the light.
That is absolutely the best choir experience I've had since lockdown began. Our reading this morning is called After the Cold by Marco Yan. Inez and I stood at the northwestern tip of Hong Kong with patient squints, watching the black-faced spoonbills rest by the mangroves, then leap in unison into flight. They went further south and past the marsh, the coast, their white feathers untouched by the winter monsoon, which was here to stay. Didn't we believe they'd return after the cold, and the faint narrow lines that line their taut wings reduced to was the best omen anyone could ever have. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. My name again is Leela Sinha, and I serve in an entrepreneurial community ministry in the Bay Area. I like to let new congregations know that my preaching draws heavily on the beat poetry spoken word tradition, depending on what your age is and what your social location is. And as such, sometimes the words will go by really fast and the cadence gets kind of poetic. You might miss some words, that's fine. Just let them wash over you. You'll get exactly what you need. What you need will fall into your heart, and the rest can fall away. So in the spirit of this wild and strange internet-driven year, not that I wasn't on the internet an awful lot before this year, let's begin with a tweet from Anna the Distracted Gardener, who lists herself in her bio as a fellow UU on Twitter, November 22nd. My 8-year-old in the car today. Do you want me to throw the confetti in my pocket? Me. No, not in the car. Why do you have confetti in your pocket? 8-year-old. It's my emergency confetti. I carry it everywhere in case there is good news. In Fiddler on the Roof, there's a line toward the end as the village is being taken over by unfriendly government forces and everyone is being forced to move, where one of the characters says to the village rabbi, "Rabbi, we've been waiting for the Messiah all our lives. Wouldn't this be a good time for him to come?" And the rabbi replies, "We'll have to wait for him someplace else. Meanwhile, let's start packing." When I came to the Bay Area from Maine 4 years ago, I had hoped to have my own place, a bedroom, a living room, a dining room, and an office. I set my sights on buying a house eventually. I thought maybe after a few years, I'd be in a position to do that. But entrepreneurial ministry and the reality of Bay Area housing prices and moving and then COVID and everything else had other plans. I was renting instead a single room in someone's house, very normal around here. But after 3 years, it got a little awkward. My business and my personal life and my art didn't all fit in 13 by 15 feet. I'm 45 years old. It's a little tricky. And then COVID hit and my housemate was home more often, by which I mean always. I had hoped to move directly from that little room in a house, into a house of my very own. But it wasn't happening and things were getting very crowded in my one room. And I finally realized that I'd have to wait for my dream home someplace else. Meanwhile, I needed to start packing. Now, unlike that little Jewish village in Russia, I was not forced to move by government occupation of my home, not this time. I did sort of leave Maine for that reason. But this time I was, for one of the few times in my life, entirely in control of the whole thing, right down to being able to pick when my new lease started because the apartment I was signing a lease for was already empty, and taking the whole month of overlap to move my things. Having done most of my moves under the stress and duress of unwanted breakups and separations, this was an incredible luxury. I had the love and support of my partners. I was surrounded by kind people. It was kind of amazing. I chose to move just before the end of October on the 28th so that we could be settled in the new home by Samhain, which, in case you don't know, that's the pagan New Year. It's celebrated on the same day as Halloween, and marked the coming of the darkness and the turning of the year in the new space. That felt auspicious and right. But between the time we signed the lease and the date I had chosen, there was this waiting. The waiting of Advent is one thing. You're just waiting, right? It's December and you're waiting and you don't know really if anything is going to change or get better. You've heard that things are going to get better, but you're not sure, and you're waiting. The waiting, wanting, hoping, praying, holding your breath feeling, where you just hang on one more day, where you just hope one more day, where you just pray if you're the praying sort, one more day, one more day, one more day. But the moment of Yule, of winter solstice, is different. It's different because you know that something has changed. It has happened. It just isn't happening quite yet. There's that slight change in the light, the morning after the longest night, the crack in the shades lets in a different kind of sunbeam. That crispness has a slight difference, but it's so tiny you can't even really describe it yet. You know, but you can't really see it clearly. You can't really put your finger on it. You sure as heck can't change how much wood you bring in or how many blankets you pile on or how you thaw the ice in the chicken coop. But you know something has changed. But nothing has changed. Chop wood, carry water, as the saying goes, but you know, like the seeds in the ground know, like the water running deep beneath the frost layer knows, like the trees know, like the birds know, you know. And so you move on a nourished faith. The faith of Advent is the faith of leaping into thin air. The faith of the solstice is the faith of stepping out onto a narrow but sturdy bridge, one that widens over time. It grows by itself, and it grows by our attention each day and each step following the last. The thing about nourishing faith is that it's got two parts. It's got the part where you feed it. You from the inside refuse to entertain the naysayers and the evil sprites that come in the dark of the morning to shout about how it will always be this bad and how everyone is awful and how nothing is going to get better. You shoo them out, you shut the door, or you feed them tea until they become drowsy and, like cranky infants, are transformed by sleep into cherubs you can safely leave in your home and not wake to chaos. That part is the part everyone is always on about. But the other part is the part over which we have so little control, which is why we don't often like to mention it, because what's the sense of talking about what we can't change? But what we can change is our glasses or contacts or prisms or whatever. What we can change is what we make of the droplets of life that trickle in through the tiny sensory openings in our carapaces when we are so hungry, so very hungry and so tired and often terrified. Because the other part is the part where we are nourished by what is around us, which, if we are lucky, includes people, our people, the ones we have chosen, the ones with whom we keep company, especially in these very constrained days. But even if it is not people, because people are also unpredictable and messy and frequently irrational and difficult, as well as wonderful, it is sometimes that little thing, that feeling, or the knowing of the ways that the roots of the trees have conversations long into the nights, and the way one day you wake up and there are new leaves. But before that, long before that, there is breath. There is the coming and going of the water and the electrons and the seeds beneath the surface. Somewhere down there, something is happening even when there is nothing on the surface to show for it. Because you can bury a seed, but it still knows. You still know. During Advent, it feels tricky to carry confetti everywhere. We might spill it. What if we need our hands to catch something? What if what's coming is not that great? We don't really know if this change is going to be good. Better to leave it at home. Better to leave our hands to the tasks at hand, to boiling water, to drinking tea in the thin light of morning, to lighting candles as prayers, to catch falling things, to lever us up out of bed just one more day. Cannot use the hands for tiny frivolities like confetti. During Advent, we skate on the thin ice of uncertainty, and we certainly do not set up fishing shacks or drive trucks out there. Maybe in the physical world, there are fishing shacks and trucks on the ice, but the ice of hope and waiting is still too thin. We do not carry heavy loads yet, not if we value our lives, not if we value our hearts. It's not time. We know it's not time. It might become time. That's the best we can do. But when solstice comes, when the sun stills and then turns, it starts to feel like it might be okay. It might be okay. Okay to take a chance. Okay to take a breath. Okay to take a moment to stand in that sunbeam that doesn't reach the door until the year turns. And then it suddenly reaches all the way across the kitchen. And you know it might be okay after all. Take the shreds of last year's office work and the little pieces of dreams that didn't quite, bits and bobs of sweaters and sealing wax, and that memory of the first handful of snow, the one that was magical, the way the first time is always magical. The first time it falls is always magical, and it's always like the first time ever. And then there are all the other ones that are not so magical. Take that first handful of snow, take candles and evergreens and the dappled light of sun returning at last. Take the smile of a neighbor and the surprised laughter of love. Sweep up the scattered scraps and the unfinished ideas and tuck them into your pocket. Tuck those little pieces into your pocket just in case there is good news. Blessed be, and amen. Let us now join in singing hymn number 83, Winds Be Still, number 83.
Winds be still, storm clouds pass and silence come. Peace grace this time with harmony. Fly, bird of hope, and shine, light of love, and in calm let all find tranquility. Bird, fly high, lift our gaze toward distant view. Help us to sense life's mystery. Fly high and far, and lead us each to see how we move through the winds of eternity. Light shining, illuminate our inward view. Help us to see with clarity. Shine bright and true, so we may join our songs in new songs that become full symphony.
Our closing words today are a reading again from Adrienne Marie Brown's Pleasure Activism. This is entitled A Radical Gratitude Spell. A spell to cast upon meeting a stranger, comrade, or friend working for social and/or environmental justice and liberation. You are a miracle walking, I greet you with wonder in a world which seeks to own your joy and your imagination. You have chosen to be free every day as a practice. I can never know the struggles you went through to get here, but I know you have swum upstream and at times been lonely. I want you to know I honor the choices you made in solitude, and I honor the work you have done to belong, and I honor your commitment to that which is larger than yourself and your journey, to love the particular container of life that is you. You are enough. Your work is enough. You are needed. Your work is sacred. You are here, and I am grateful.
Reverend Leela, that was just such a message of hope in this liminal space that we're in at this moment, where things have changed and yet we have not seen them change. And I appreciated your message so very much. Thank you so much for being willing to be with us today.
You're so welcome. It was a pleasure. And so let us gather ourselves one more moment for the benediction. Go out into the highways and byways. Hold your heart up to the sun. Fill your pockets with beautiful confetti. And welcome the light. Go in peace and go in love.